An agency plagued with scandal.
I never got away from it. I got put in that home at 4 years old. I never got away from it. They didn't care.
In reality, DHS needs to be burned to the ground and then built it back up and start over again.
And the victims are across the state of Oklahoma.
We've lived in so much fear for so long of retaliation for standing up for our families and our kids.
With a criminal investigation into the agency now ordered by state lawmakers just now getting underway.
What we're seeing is the abuse of our criminal system, abuse of our court system.
Now more than ever before, there are calls for change into the Oklahoma Department of Human Services.
When we're telling the truth and we don't have truth listeners, but we're truth tellers, do not give up.
And the calls transcend party lines, religious beliefs, and more.
If we got it wrong, God help us. We need to get those kids back to their parents.
Now on Fox 23 News at 6:30, we bring you the stories of 2 more victims.
My daughter would come home and just bawl and cry like, I don't want to go back, I don't want to go back.
And you'll see why their lives are now part of a criminal investigation into the agency.
Covering news that matters. Fox 23 News at 6:30 starts right now.
Thanks for joining me at 6:30. I'm Rick Marinon. Tonight we're speaking with more people who say they are victims of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services and their practices that they say are problematic to say the least. We're going to be upfront with you. Some of this is very emotional, but it's important because you as the taxpayer paid for this system. We also want to warn you, there are details about abuse that might be too graphic for some viewers. Something else to keep in mind. DHS says it will not comment on individual cases. Our Devin Lyon is in studio to share their stories tonight.
Now, we told you some of Alexis Freidenberg's story on Fox 23 News at 5. She spoke about suffering all types of abuse by her adopted family for over a decade. The court case for her brother, Sammy, also called Dan, is playing out in court still. But Alexis says her story shows failure upon failure by DHS. She says despite her cries for help, DHS continued to place her in the abusive home that she called a living nightmare. Here's some of our interview together.
I was 4 years old when I was placed with them. It was a living nightmare. The abuse started shortly after that. I'm just going to be honest. I was 8 years old with a gun to the back of my head by Dan, taking me out to our back pasture, telling me if I ever told anybody what happened to me, that I would end up missing like the 2 foster girls that were never found. So I got sent to go live with Dan and his wife in the middle of the night by my adopted parents after being assaulted by all of his kids because my mom had threw my head into a plywood wall.
That was when you were 17?
This was when I was 14. I got sent to go live with him in the middle of the night, this summer right before my freshman year of high school.
Sent by your mom or sent by DHS?
Sent by my adopted parents.
And did DHS ever find out about this?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that they knew. It's something I've worked extremely hard in therapy on. I'm in intensive trauma therapy, not just from the sexual abuse, but the abuse I endured with DHS. You could call it a failure, you can call it whatever you want. That's abuse by our state. That's straight up abuse by our state. I don't care whatever way you want to look at it, it's abuse. That's child abuse at the hands of our state, regardless. You're not investigating. You're putting us through more abuse than these foster homes are at the end of the day.
Would you call this a failure by DHS?
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
Because background checks, you guys should have dug deeper into that. No child should have been placed in a home that even has one report to you about sexual abuse, regardless if it's unfounded or not. Like, that is something that's been reported. I think that it needs to go further back into family histories too of these foster families. You're not doing follow-up visits. You don't do anything after children are adopted. It's like, okay, they're adopted, great, we don't have to deal with them. No, a lot of these families wait, like mine did, until after we're adopted and know that they don't have to worry about DHS coming in to check on that specific child constantly, that the abuse starts. the policies and procedures and the way that they do things right now is not at the safety and not at the protection of children, period.
Do you think some charges need to happen?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think every single person needs to be held accountable, even former employees of DHS that have left now. I don't care. I think every single person that has ever had a hand in anything needs to be charged, even if they're no longer with the state.
What's next?
Continue this fight. This isn't a statewide issue. This is a nationwide issue. And this is something I feel very, very strongly about. And I want to use my story and my voice to help other people, especially children in the foster care system that are afraid to speak up. Because again, as a foster child, you don't want to speak up, because who's to say that the next home you don't get put in isn't going to be worse than the one you just got pulled out of? That is our reality. I can't live my life dwelling on it. I can't be angry. I can't hate him. I forgive him. I don't forgive him for him. I forgive him for myself. Because at the end of the day, I will never be happy, and I will continue to hold on to that anger if I can't forgive him. So I forgive him for myself, but I will never forget the things that happened to me in that family by anybody, any of them. I'm living my life, and I am happy, 28 years, happy for the first time, free. The only worry I have is DHS even going to really make a change? Is there even going to be a change?
Alexis is supposed to testify against her alleged abuser next year, but she's been in contact with some of the lawmakers behind the order to either be added to that investigation or simply support them at their rallies.
Again, DHS says it does not comment on individual cases. So brave of her.
Absolutely. I couldn't help myself but get emotional after sitting through this interview and hearing her say, I forgive him, but I demand change at the same time.
I don't talk about this a lot. I am a DHS foster parent. I don't say this on the air. We don't have a child right now. I've seen our reporting on this. I will not take a child into my custody with this system right now. Brave reporting.
Absolutely.
When state lawmakers called for a criminal investigation into DHS, the investigation order had the stories of 6 different families as their proof. State and federal agents should investigate the agency. Devin, you found one of those families among thousands of stories.
Sean Reed's story is one of those families state lawmakers point to. He sat down with me in an interview along with a friend and advocate of his to tell me Sean's story and the changes they're demanding.
Do you believe DHS is lying about crimes against children?
100%.
Do you believe they lied in court about it?
100%.
Sean Reed is just another parent coming forward, answering yes to those same questions. He told me the order for the OSBI to investigate DHS and his child's case is long overdue.
I'm ready to see something happen. I've been waiting on this.
Sean tells me DHS failed to acknowledge abuse claims against his child's biological mother.
I mean, it's from fingernail beds being cut and scraped with razors to try to get fingernail polish off because her stepmother and her stepsister all went and got their nails done together. Things like that. Coming and crying in your arms like, Daddy, my thumb hurts, my fingers hurt. You know, this not feeding me the same thing as she's feeding the other kids. You know, she comes home and cries about things like that. She's been cussed. Her mother's cussed her several times over the phone. Teeth hurt, having medical or dental procedures done at home illegally with stolen tools and parts from a dentist. She bawled for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes trying to tell me, show me she wanted to tell me something, and it took her 20 or 30 minutes to tell me. She's being tickled in between her legs on her thighs, supposedly.
Have they involved law enforcement to a proper extent in their investigations?
No.
Were they ever contacted?
Law enforcement?
Yeah.
I don't know that DHS has contacted them. I highly doubt it. One of the allegations was my daughter being put in the shower with her stepdad. And the judge said that's poor parenting. Same thing with the chemical burns around her mouth that blistered her face all up. That was bad parenting. My daughter would come home and just bawl and cry like, I don't want to go back, I don't want to go back. Daddy, why won't nobody believe me? Nobody believes what I'm telling them. You should be able to promise things to your kids that are in your grasp, I guess. I promised my daughter that she wouldn't have to go back to her mom's, and I don't know, 4 or 5 hours later, I had to drive home and tell her to pack her stuff. All because that judge called in to get me checked out for mental abuse for trying to help her. And I lied to her. That'll be my last promise that I can ever make to her.
I asked Sean what justice would look like and mean for him.
On my personal case, I mean, I believe that my daughter's went through enough abuse where she's been with her mother, and I think I would like to see her home. With DHS, I'd like to see them completely gone, but we have to have some kind of system to do it. They need to, I think, clean it out and start over. I think they need to hand select everyone from the top to the bottom. The first thing I would, if I was to take over DHS and run the whole thing, I would go back and probably hire every single employee that's been fired, because those are the good ones.
More families and private investigators continue to reach out to me about their family struggles with DHS and problems they have with the current system. I will continue to gather and share their stories with you while work to change the agency gets underway in Oklahoma City. Live in studio, covering news that matters, Devin Lyon, Fox 23 News.
Great work, Devin. State lawmakers have now formally asked for a criminal investigation to be opened into DHS and its practices. That letter is based off of some of those stories you just heard and far more.
What we're seeing is the abuse of our criminal system, abuse of our court system. And when you call it out, guess what? Nothing to be done and nobody be held accountable. It is time that the people that are doing this in state government are held accountable. And when we start holding them accountable, watch it get cleaned up.
In a shocking turn of events recently, despite being asked by state lawmakers to launch a criminal investigation into DHS, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation says it, by law, cannot carry out what was asked of them because they didn't follow specific statutes, those state lawmakers. We are told state lawmakers expect to have some words with them soon about finding some kind of path forward. There is a new director of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, and he's been tasked with doing the heavy lifting of cleaning up the agency and even offering up suggestions for reform for the next legislative session, now just a few months away. Jeffrey Cartmell is now in charge of the agency. Cartmell was working for the State Office of Juvenile Affairs before this appointment. We had the Governor Kevin Stitt, on the program just the other week, and we asked him about DHS reform and the leadership change. Here is his full response, unedited in his own words.
We're really excited about Jeffrey Cartmell running DHS, putting a fresh set of eyes on that. And I tell people all the time, that agency specifically, there's nothing bigger than if the government is going to say that we're going to take kids out of this home and put them in another home. I can't think of a bigger issue. We better get that right. And so that's my whole deal, is I want to make sure I dig into that, we look at it, we make sure we're making those right decisions, because ultimately we need parents with their kids. We need parents doing a better job in some cases with their kids, for sure. And there's kids in dangerous situations, and that's what DHS is for. But there's also cases when, if we got it wrong, you know, God help us, we need to get those kids back to their parents. And so those are the things that I'm really trying to dig in, put a fresh set of eyes, make sure that we look at our processes, things that were set up 20 years ago, maybe they're different today. And but it is a complicated, it's very, very complicated, because you're dealing with kids, and I think Oklahomans are super passionate. We better get that right.
Again, DHS says they do not comment on specific individual cases. Here's the statement we received from DHS on the investigation call when it was first announced. Quote, Oklahoma Human Services is an advocate for transparency and will fully cooperate with any investigation into the agency.